BookTube, and welcome back to the library tour of Doom. This is a tour through every book in my collection, and right now it's a tour through every book in Mark Richardson's collection, and one day it may be a tour through every book in your collection. You never know. You better watch your step. And it's not meant to subsume all other BookTube content. I've gotten several messages from quite a few of you saying that although you like the library tour of Doom, you miss all the rest of it. And for those of you who maybe aren't keeping up with the channel, errant Huguenots, or have just come to the channel, have just found it for the first time, I am actually on vacation up in scenic Vermont at the house of Mark Richardson of Richardson Reads, a fellow booktuber. And when you're on vacation and everybody else around you is on vacation too, and the household has its own rhythm, the old routines are hard to upkeep, even for me, and I love routines, but even for me, it's not just that they're hard to upkeep, it's that when you're on vacation, the thought seeps into your mind that maybe it's not all that important to keep them up. Now, I know that's not fair. We've built up this relationship. It is very much two-way. So I'm not meaning these library tours of Doom to supplant everything else. Of course, I'm not at Hyde Cottage, so I'm not getting mail. So mail hauls are largely out of the question, but there's lots of other stuff that we could be doing, lots of it, and I mean to do that. In fact, one of you, a very close watcher of my channel, very flattered by that, said that since routines tend to get broken on vacations, maybe now would be a time to do some standalone content. Some starter kits, perhaps the resumption of the Presidential Library series with the long-neglected James Monroe, perhaps even the ultimate, the holy grail of standalone content, which is the Western Canon Starter Kit Part 2, the sophomore year. Those are all really good ideas, and they will work. In this setting, they will work. All they require is preparation. I can do that in a library the size of Mark's as easily as I can do it in a library the size of mine. So just know I'm percolating on all of that. I'm not just forgetting that. But in the meantime, while we're doing Library Tour of Doom, at least we've got another book to talk about today, and I have a lot to say on it, so it's a great hefty thing too. It's this. It's the annotated Memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant. You can see it's annotated by Elizabeth Samet, who teaches English at West Point. And this is the Liverite annotated Ulysses S. Grant. There is also a Harvard University Press annotated Ulysses S. Grant. Liverite and Harvard University Press are in a kind of a friendly rivalry with their annotated volumes. And I love them both. I like a good annotated volume, even when, as in this case, it makes me scratch my head a little. You know, as is the case with, for instance, Little Women or, God help us, Pride and Prejudice, certainly true for the Memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant, that you don't technically need annotation. The most you maybe need is a good informed introduction to sort of put your feet on the ground. But as far as understanding the text as you go along, which was once upon a time originally the idea for annotated editions, you absolutely don't need that with this volume. It was written to I won't say mimic, or maybe to channel the clarity of the best kind of military histories and also military dispatches. So, and it very much succeeds at that. So you don't need this annotator or anybody else to do it. But if you're going to do that, and I admit there's a huge amount of interest involved in what a good annotator can dredge up to go along with the text, then you're faced with a choice. Which do you get? You're not going to want to get both. These are fairly pricey. This hardcover was $45. The paperback's probably $30. And I love to watch this little informal rivalry between the two annotated edition series. And you never know who's going to come out better, who's going to do a better job. But in this case, I think the prize has to go to Liverite. This is a better annotated edition of Grant than the Harvard University Press, Belknap Press of Harvard University Press. And it's gorgeous. Absolutely. First of all, it's a great big thing. But these modern annotated editions don't, of course, just stop with footnotes. Although you get plenty of those, and they're in a slightly different colored font. Makes it easier to just find them. But in this edition also has amazing artwork just throughout. Not only period artwork and related stuff like that, but also later stuff that touches on themes or ideas that are raised in the course of this book. This is Grant largely writing about, well, a large chunk of it is about the American Civil War, but you get a lot of his military history too. He was very active in the Mexican-American War, along with virtually all of the men that he fought alongside, and virtually all the men that he fought against. A lot of that generation of soldiers on either side of the American Civil War got their blooding, their first taste for warfare in Mexico, the walls of Chapultepec and whatnot. I want to show you also here if I can find one. I'm not going to trust to random chance. I'll just flip through. I want to show you an example of the beautiful maps that are all throughout this book. Also, all the sorts of things that, of course, when this book originally appeared, there wasn't the technology to do. Of course, I'm going to get, when you're looking for this sort of thing, you're going to get, here we go. Here we go. The maps are in multiple colors. The directions, the fortifications, all of it is in different colors to help you. It must have been a labor of love to get this thing to look visually as good as it does. In addition to that, you get a huge introduction and gigantic number of appendices to help you with every aspect of a book for which you need no help. And that can be fun in its own right, right? I mean, I've lost count of how many annotated editions of Dracula I've read. You don't need an annotated edition to understand and love Dracula, obviously. Just go to your local Barnes & Noble and drop $15 on a beautiful little fake leather-bound single volume thing. You don't need the rest of Bram Stoker, trust me. Just a little thing like that won't have any annotation at all, might not even have an introduction. You're still going to be just fine. Even so, when you love a thing, you love seeing people talk about it. So I long for the day when Liverite does, for instance, an annotated Jungle Books by Rudyard Kipling. Of course, that day will never come, because if they announced plans to that, they'd be brigaded on Twitter by the same 12 psychos that would call them racists, imperialists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, cultural appropriates, who knows? I have no idea what they would say. But despite the fact that they are demonstrably mentally ill, that brouhaha on Twitter from those 12 people, those 12 accounts, would be enough to make multi-million-dollar Harvard University Press change their minds and cancel the book. So they won't go through it, is what I'm saying. Somebody on the staff will have a 20-something nephew who will just clue them in ahead of time and say, you shouldn't do that, because you're going to end up withdrawing the plan anyway. I would still love to see it. I would love to see annotated virtually anything that I love. Imagine, it'll never happen. It'll never happen in our lifetimes. But imagine a Liverite, fully, gigantic, annotated Lord of the Rings. Wouldn't that be incredible? Oh, man. Or a big annotated edition of the first 3 Barsoom novels of Edgar Rice Burroughs. Lots of annotation that you could do. I myself could name you a couple of people who you should tap to be the editor of such a volume. But one way or another, if you love a thing, right, then you want to see all the ancillary material. You want to know everything there is to know about it, including all of the trivia that you might not have caught, no matter how many times you've read the book itself. That is not the case in this book. I don't love the Memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant, and I also don't love the book with which they are almost always paired, the Memoirs of William Tecumseh Sherman. I don't find a whole lot of worth in either one of them. At least Sherman I can comfortably ignore, but enough members of my own profession, of book criticism, book commentary, the book chat world, as Gore Vidal called it, enough members of my own profession have, perhaps with too many martinis in their system, got on their boxes and said that this is one of the greatest things ever written in American literary history. I saw one person, I shall not name him, actually say that in print, that this is one of the great American literary masterpieces, fit to stand beside Uncle Tom's Cabin or Leaves of Grass or Moby Dick, which certainly is not true. Okay, just so we're clear on that point, it certainly is not true. It's very interesting in its own staid, stolid way. It's very interesting, but even if you were to lend credence to the persistent rumors that General Grant got a lot of help, page by page, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, from Mark Twain in the writing of this book, even if you put credence in those persistent rumors, that still doesn't raise this thing above just about the level of military doggerel. It has none of the elan of the military memoirs that were being written at the same time on the other side of the Atlantic in the UK. it doesn't approach them in any way. And the affect here, the conceit of the book is that it doesn't want to. That it's as plain and dusty and straightforward a soldier's account as Grant always fashioned himself to be, a plain and dusty, straightforward soldier. So maybe that's all of a piece. One way or another, it ended up producing a book. Look at how pretty this thing is. Just lovely. This is the one to have if you really love this book. There is a Library of America volume, but this is not to be missed. It is such an elaborately beautiful production. But one way or another, if that was the goal with this book, then it gold itself right out of my affections. So I had this once upon a time from Liverite, and I didn't. I think I reviewed it, but I didn't keep it. But it was nice to see. It was nice to see in a lovingly tended collection. That's just where it belongs. So there you go. We followed up some frivolous fantasy with a gigantic work of military history, of military memoir. And the neat thing about the annotations in a case like this is it's not so much true with Grant, who probably, sitting there on his porch dying of throat cancer, would probably have rather died on the spot of a gunshot to the head than write a knowing falsehood. But even so, when you're reading a memoir, you often want the annotations to tell you where the author gets things right and where they get things wrong. In a lot of memoirs, the getting things wrong will be intentional. Not so much in this one, but even so, it's very, very good to have our good professor here spot checking Grant at every point when your interest might really hunker down on the specific details. It's a wonderfully unobtrusive and knowledgeable job that's done at that. So if your library has this book and you're curious, give it a try. If you can find a cheap copy, I have never looked for a cheap copy of this thing. I had it, but I don't want it back in my collection, so I've never bothered to look for it on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or anything like that. But if the sound of it strikes your fancy, it has my wholehearted approval. It is the volume to have of this book. And we'll see where the Library Tour of Doom takes us tomorrow. we shall see. And in the meantime, I will cogitate on the rest of the story, on the other videos that we can be making. But in the meantime, I'm gonna sign off. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.